on top of it, maybe more so than a regular project. And then you have to hold it a long time. So it's a labor of love, but you're really helping people, and you're really going to have a project that's going to really kind of satisfy a big need in a lot of different communities.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. If you are enjoying this show, you know what I'm going to ask you to do. Give us some feedback, all right? Leave us a rating and review. It helps us and listeners find this show for their own investing needs. And if you haven't done so, or this is your first time listening, be sure to hit that follow or subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. We've got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Kurt Volkman. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the Mastermind button today. Now, Kurt Volkman is an associate principal specializing in the multifamily housing and mixed-use sector at HED, one of the oldest and largest architecture and engineering firms in the U.S., with over 400 employees and over 100 million in annual revenue. Now, Kurt has over 30 years of architectural experience and was in leadership roles at notable companies such as Valerio, Dewalt and Legat Architects before joining HED in 2022. Let's welcome to the show, Kurt Volkman.
Thank you for having me, John.
Hey, Kurt, I went over your background at a very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes to fill in some of those gaps?
Sure. Like you said, I've been working in architecture for almost 30 years now. The thing about architecture that always got me interested was the fact that it's an opportunity to help people, right? And to help people at all different scales of life. And what led me into kind of the focuses that I do kind of spend time on are really, again, just what's important to people most, right? We think about shelter as a way, as a human need, and to me that's profound, and also it's something that's a little recession proof. So it kind of helps out that people always need a place to stay, and somewhere to a pillow to lay their head on, right? So
Yeah, I love it, man. So you got into this space knowing that, hey, housing is always going to be a need. Why architecture in particular?
it's just something that I was attracted to. My uncle basically was one of my biggest influences. He was a little bit of an architectural, uh, kind of fanboy, if you will. He worked for the Chicago Architecture Foundation, leading tours of historic homes. He also led tours for the Chicago Motor Club, taking people all over Europe and Asia, introducing them to architecture. So he would always come home from these trips and share all these wonderful books and travel guides and pictures that he took. So as a little kid, you're seeing all this and you can't help but think, wow, this is just absolutely amazing. So
I love it. As you think about your time in architecture and obviously the influence from your uncle, what's been the highlight for you? I mean, what's the project you look at like, man, that was so cool, and I'm so glad I got to be a part of that?
uh, I think the one that I think was my most favorite project to work on was the Godfrey Hotel in Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, Great hotel, if I do say so myself. But it was the challenge of it that really is what made it profound for me, right? And it was a project where it had kind of languished in a recession due to various factors and had been kind of sealed off and waited. And then, we had gotten contacted by a person who bought the, kind of the fallow site, if you will, and the building had been erected up to the structure, but it hadn't been enclosed. And we got a call, and it's like, hey, by the way, we bought the building. Mayor Emanuel turned the permit on, go, and we're going to change what the program is. So it was literally a design on the fly. I worked hand in hand with the contractor. I would literally spray paint a line on the slab. Contractor followed behind me, setting studs right behind me. So I had to be perfect and do it right the first time, and really, kind of talk through issues on site. And it just was a mad scramble to get it built, and we got it built in time. And it just, it's been a great project ever since. Now it's celebrated its 10th anniversary recently, so now I
Yeah,
really feel it.
it's like a new kind of iconic hotel in Chicago. I lived in Chicago for 8 years, and I remember when the Guy first was built and opened up. I mean, it was all the rage, and certainly has a beautiful view of the city as well. And that rooftop's amazing. So that's
Yeah, it
a
was a
great
wonderful
project.
team to work with too. That's what made it great. Everybody from leadership and those of us who were doing the day-to-day work. It's just one of those things that just, everything hit right at the right way, and it just was a great effort.
I love it. Well, listen, most of our listeners are not going to be out there building the iconic hotels of major
Right.
cities, but we are looking to grow and build our real estate portfolio. So, for those folks who are maybe looking to get into either new construction or do some renovation of projects, give us a couple of tips to help them stand out and not make mistakes.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, especially if you're doing new construction or renovation, the big thing that I find helps your cause the most is go seek out, people in the jurisdiction, right? So economic developers, building departments, zoning officials, go seek them out, get an audience with them, talk to them, understand what they need, and understand that process, because the process at the city and municipal levels takes time, and that's money sometimes that we run into where people don't account for. And it really gives you a better understanding of that timeline and all the various steps that you need to do to get a project built. Renovations can be faster, right? Because you're not having to basically build the whole building by itself. But at the same time, there are still requirements that city officials are going to want to see. So it's worth the investment of time to go seek out, people at the municipalities and at the jurisdictional level, and go, get their input and buy into the project before you start doing too much. Because you might find, you find the great site, you might find it's perfect for what you want to do. It might not be perfect for what they want to do, and then it becomes an obstacle, and it's a drain on budget sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting because as investors, you almost feel like, oh, I'm just going to do what I want to do. And you feel like there should be some autonomy to go out there and execute your vision. But then you realize that, yeah, there's city officials, there's other stakeholders who maybe they didn't invest the money or the capital, but they do have a vested interest in what you're doing. And I remember we had a 28 unit here in Cincinnati in a small city within the city.
Mm.
And man, I was shocked at how much those city officials cared about what we were doing at this property. Because in my mind, it's only 28 units, but this is actually one of the larger properties in this small city. And they really want us to do a condo conversion. I'm like, I didn't budget for a condo conversion,
Right,
but they
exactly.
had concerns that we wouldn't run it properly as an apartment. The previous owner really was loose with the kind of residents that he allowed there. And it really became this thing. And I was just completely surprised. So I love your tip on talk to the local officials, get a sense of, what are they looking for? What concerns do they have? Maybe there's some support and, maybe there's some financial, incentive as well based on what you're looking to do. So even if you're buying something that exists, it definitely helps, makes it easier to get that buy-in from the city if you're going to go that route. Sometimes people don't necessarily go the follow, I guess, the proper procedures, or maybe they don't know the proper procedures as far as, again, work with an architect, getting those plans pulled, getting the permits. Can you just talk about why that's an important process and not just going out there and starting to rip drywall down?
Yeah, no, and I can tell you from my experience, I've gone into too many buildings where, a builder kind of came in and said, oh, they could do it, right? And then you get called a little late into the job and try to fix things. And, you know, there, like any profession, there's good architects and bad architects, but, I'm an architect, so I'm gonna say there's a lot more good. And in that, I think, what we can help do is planning, right? So we have experience kind of working with, either sometimes developers that are new to it, some developers that have been doing it a long time, and just the ability to kind of, we understand how the construction works. We should be pretty good, hopefully, at understanding maybe not the finite issues of finance, but the general ideas of finance, and just, more or less as a sounding board, maybe early on a project, what could work and what, doesn't work. Obviously double checking all the codes and everything that go on, and just understanding, an architect is supposed to have a general understanding of like the cost of construction. Not necessarily we shouldn't be pricing it by any means. You should have a contractor or builder price it. But an architect's job at its core is to design a building to the budget. And good architects can do that. And I think that's what's helpful, when we think about the process, right? We suggest going to talk to municipality to understand timeline. Designing to the budget is paramount, right? Because that keeps you on your time, and it keeps you on target, and allows the developers to maximize their profits at the end of the job.
Yeah, I think too, like just trying to make sure you understand there's known knowns and there, known unknowns. And sometimes
Exactly.
those unknowns pop up, and having that architect, having the people who understand this process from beginning to end on your team and in the process early on just makes life a little bit easier, because things pop up and it always sucks when you got to go back and redo work or fix something that you've already spent money on, or you not maybe underestimated the budget for something because you didn't really understand the magnitude. I'll go back to that 28 unit because it was a heavy renovation project, and we didn't realize that the electrical panels needed to be upgraded. Wasn't
Mhm.
our budget. No one mentioned it to us, but that was something that we learned the hard way. So again, having that person on your team that understands your vision and what you're going to do, but then also recognizes, okay, hey, if you're going to do that, here's the other thing you're going to have to consider, right? This is what's on code, or building's not wired for this level of service. So make sure you have that is paramount. I know a
Right.
lot of investors have really started to open up to the idea of development. Folks who
Mhm.
before were just doing value add investments, that's been tight to find. So they've looked at more ground up development. Obviously, opportunity zones and some of the funding that's been made available has made that very attractive. But I know the results haven't quite been there yet. Can you talk about, just affordable housing and development from your perspective, and maybe why there's kind of a mishap or misstep there?
Well, I think there's a couple different factors at play right now, and it works on every sort of economic class of housing, and into mixed use, where we're seeing it. I think right now there are the affordable housing is market has been as competitive as I've ever seen it. The challenge in America today is affordable housing is really difficult to build, right? So the cost of construction basically dictates that for a person to get return on investment, they have to hold it for a very long period of time. Now, affordable housing has occupancy rates in the like 92% range, right? So it's great because once you build it, it stays full, and people tend to want to stay, in there, right? You're not renewing leases and all that, which is great because it costs more money to go find a new tenant than it does to retain a tenant. So I think, affordable housing has definitely some benefits, but the problem is the cost of construction is such that it makes it difficult to build, right? Because you have to hold it a long time. So as architects, we're trying to find ways to build it, more efficiently. Can we build it faster? Are strategies like modular construction? Is there maybe, affordable housing goes into more renovations? So we might look to convert a different building type into housing. So there are all different ways to go about it, and there's not a right answer or wrong answer. Every situation is unique, and so we're trying to find ways to do it faster. It has benefits, but it needs subsidy at this point, and that's the challenge. The subsidies for affordable housing are highly competitive given the nature of the market, right? Because most of the upper market and market rate housing, kind of financing deals are, if you're seeing something built now, chances are it was financed a couple of years ago, and it's just kind of working its way through the system now. So deals are kind of on hold, and everybody's got like a little bit of the presidential pause right now, waiting to see how the election breaks. We're waiting to see if rates drop in September. Um, a bunch of different factors, right? We saw the rates kind of spike up. Now the rates have kind of stabilized. It's not that it's not that like older developers for sure have seen markets where 5.5%, 6%. They've done those deals before in the past. It wasn't that long ago, right? It was 15, 20 years ago that interest rates were this. So it's not that they can't do it. It's just we'd become accustomed to rates being low, and now it kind of changes the kind of paradigm a little bit about how the financing goes. I'm not that guy, right? I'm the guy with the crayons just trying to make sure the building looks pretty. So realistically, then I feel a little pressure to maximize the value on that. What gets the best returns, right? Not that I don't at all times, but definitely, we want to make sure if they're going through with that level of investment, that level of effort, and that speaks again to the front end time that a developer has to spend on affordable housing. There's a lot of little steps you have to do to get that project built, and then on top of it, maybe more so than a regular project, market rate project, and then you have to hold it a long time. So it's a labor of love, but you're really helping people, and you're really going to have a project that's going to really kind of satisfy a big need in a lot of different communities.
Yeah, you talked about just interest rates and, the impact on high-end luxury apartments. We're seeing those properties come online, right? A lot of developers are doing that, but
Right.
that's when they were locking in the lower interest rates. Now we see looking at the pipeline. There's not as many coming online here over the next couple of years for that
Right.
same reason, right? They're waiting it out to see what happens with interest rates. Not a lot of new development. In fact, the numbers are really concerning when you look at the amount of housing that's going to come in 2025 and beyond as of right now. And you mentioned on the affordable side, it really is difficult to build affordable housing without some level of subsidy. So that's been the challenge for a lot of operators or a lot of developers is you have to have it. There's a lot of, hoops you got to jump through to make those things work to get them, leveled up. And then you got to hold it for a long period, in some cases 15 years. So there's definitely a lot there. And part of the reason we're not seeing this kind of make its way to the everyday person is there's so much red tape to get these things done that we still don't have affordable housing. And it just feels almost like a marketing word. People say affordable housing, but we're not actually making housing affordable. So there's still a lot of people who are looking for better affordability when it comes to housing. As you've looked at this, I know that you've worked on kind of a new approach that you're excited about. Can you share more about that?
Sure. So what we look at a lot of times in big master developments, or even smaller developments, we'll look at the existing community around it, but we look at try to get a mix of mixed age, use, and income, and shorten it down. It's a Maui, right? So what that means is mixed age. That's the empty nester market is actually in demand. So when you look at housing, the baby boomers aren't selling their houses, and part of that is there's not a stock of houses in units available. One, where they want to live, and two, that are the right size and right fit for them coming out of a house, right? So if we're not getting people out of their houses, then those houses don't go back into the market and allow younger families to buy those houses, right? So there isn't that normal kind of arbitrage of housing stock that's going on. Mix of uses, obviously, what's great is, we think about like communities in the Chicago area. Some communities, the individuals that live there have longer commutes than others. So if you can build in different types of employment opportunities to kind of satisfy a local area, the better it is, right? Because then people can walk to work, or maybe the commute is much shorter, right? So we're shortening that time, and that time, and uses can generate foot traffic. Foot traffic is a great measure of safety, right? It brings safety to a community because you're building in destinations into your development. That's always a great idea because that means your development is thriving. And then income levels. What's great about mixed income development, and what we're seeing in that is you have the ability to then kind of use the market rate, or maybe higher, to offset some of the financial demands of the affordable housing. It allows you to get a better rate of return. So some cities like will demand 20% of your development be affordable, right? And it's like in trying to get the affordable housing dispersed around any given community. The You can take that on your own and say, okay, maybe I'll do the 20%, maybe I'll do 30, maybe I'll do 40, and I can build more of the units, right? So I think there's opportunities to, for the people that want to dive into it, because we know, like, again, the occupancy rates on affordable housing are higher than market rate housing. Renewal stats are higher. So, I mean, if you think of your own 401k portfolio, right? You don't just throw everything in the high risk stuff, right? You diversify your portfolio. affordable housing in a way diversifies your portfolio. You might have some market rate, you might have some affordable, you might have some workforce, and be able to kind of figure out what's going to maximize your profit. What are the good long-term holds? What are the different opportunities that you have? And every city needs it. Like there in some states, like in Illinois, we have a law that every municipality has to provide it, a bare minimum percentage of affordable housing within their city limits. So there is a demand for it. And nationwide, I think there's a demand of overall it's like 7.4 million housing units needed versus today, right? So we can't build it fast enough. It takes a long time to build that many units. So if there's ways to kind of mix the incomes, get those closer to uses, right? Jobs and employment, keeps people off the streets, maybe allows people to kind of walk to a restaurant, a shop, or service. It just benefits everybody, and it becomes a destination.
What makes these projects, I guess, more affordable to build or more feasible than your traditional kind of ground up development or kind of the traditional affordable housing development play?
Well, I think the way that they can, again, gets into diversification of revenue streams. Retail is always a tough market to get into, right? The average retail tenant doesn't last very long. So you have to find the right kind of retail, right? So when we talk about other concept, besides Maui that we talk about is, there's this concept of the 15-minute city in urban planning and architecture, and that you should be able to get to everything you need within 15 minutes, 15-minute walk of your residence. In that, though, I think there's also kind of an economic strategy that has to be applied to that, right? Yes, you should be able to walk to almost everything you need, but the economic strategy is what is an 18-hour day, right? So 6 a.m. to midnight. And then, in a bigger development where you could have multiple uses and a lot of different buildings, potentially you're sitting there thinking, okay, what are the uses, from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m.? What are the 9 a.m. to 3 p.m.? What are the 3 p.m. to 6 p.m.? What takes me to midnight? And if you can create basically retail types or the mixed use type of developments that can foster some of those different things, then you're bringing people to a community, right, or into the development, and it might strengthen the community around you. So that's being, in a way, it's a good neighbor, right? And then the other factor of it, there's some businesses that are great in terms of like healthcare, right? Obviously, people have to, it's a known destination. You have to come there. What happens when people leave that healthcare office, right? Go stop, have a cup of coffee. Maybe they go grab a lunch, maybe do something. So then they become investors in that community in the short term. So that's the benefit of all this is if you're smart about how you're planning the different uses, you can get people who, especially in the affordable and workforce, that can feed that local area in those uses, keep them, again, off the streets and traffic so they're not having to drive 45 minutes away. Maybe they can live closer and walk to it or short drive. And you can kind of get the workforce you need. You can get the kind of sales tax you need. Cities love sales tax. You get the income, obviously, from a thriving business more so than an empty storefront. And you keep residents happy because now all of a sudden they have a thriving community that they're a part of. So even if we're looking at a single site, we always kind of take a peek at it and understand, what are the businesses around it, and can I plan for something that maybe that the local community doesn't have.
Yeah, I like that you're talking about really two aspects, right? One is overall city development and city planning and kind of
Mhm.
building this community where, you have the things there for that 18-hour day, the 15-minute city, but also on the micro level for that individual project to say, okay, hey, what does this area need? What does this community need? What can we build or what can we add here? Because I think for many people, there's a feel good component about being able to be a part of a revitalization. But most investors are not in a position to take on, an entire community redevelopment. So they're looking at it from the lens of, hey, I just want to take maybe this 12 unit and convert it or do something different to it. Or hey, there's a piece of property here that was maybe industrial or it was something else, and I want to reimagine what this could be, but obviously want to add value to the community. When you're looking at projects or kind of taking on opportunities, what does that process look like? Do you start with kind of what you talked about as far as evaluating what the city and community has, or do you try to really understand more of what's most profitable for that location?
Well, I think a lot of times we start with kind of a goals approach, right? So I'll work with the developer and like, okay, hey, Miss Developer, Mr. Developer, what are you trying to achieve out of this project? And really get their understanding, right? And they'll give me the metrics of it and all that. So then kind of taking the, kind of ideas, whether it be the Maui principle or the, kind of 18-hour principle, we'll look at it and try to get an understanding of like, okay, uh, what is it, right? And again, if it's a single site, it's like, and it could just be all housing, but that might be the criteria as we're doing sites, selection with our developer partners. So then we might be saying, hey, this site has all the components that you might be looking for. That could be a thriving community, and this is a great spot to put your people. Or this site has some challenges. Maybe you want to consider, something else, right? Because we're always thinking to what allows them to maintain a resident longer. And I think that's what's important. So we go through these goals that we set up, and then we develop strategies with our developer partners that hopefully kind of makes the project successful for them.
Yeah, you talked about that retention rate. You mentioned that a couple of times, right? So if these affordable projects have higher retention rates, higher occupancy,
Mhm.
talk to me about, some of the factors that drive that.
So I think overall people want to stay where they're comfortable, right? And that's comfort is a very nebulous term. Right? So what does that mean to an individual, right? So part of that could be, are they in a neighborhood that's thriving, right? And part of that is when you're in their unit, is the unit comfortable? Does it have enough storage? Does it have, you can never build enough storage into these, into apartment buildings anymore and multifamily units. It still is one of those keys that's always there, even in the age when everything's still, getting smaller or digital. Storage is still king, right? George Carlin's thing, right? You always want to go somewhere where you put all your stuff. So I think that's important too, right? So I think the in-unit experience is important, like the acoustics, is it set up the way you want? Does it flow really well? And then outside of that, right, and by flow also, I mean, it's like, where do you plug in? How does the wireless work? All the different, factors that make your individual quality of life better inside the unit. And then obviously from a site, purpose, what gives you kind of that idea, right? So if we think of housing going from the public realm to the private realm, what are the steps that get you from, semi-public to semi-private to private inside, right? So you're in the street, you're parking your car, or you're getting off the train, walking to your place. So what is that safety factor that makes you feel comfortable just even on the approach of your building? So I have to ask myself, okay, well, what makes this better for a resident, right? Do I have to light it a certain way? Are there regulations? So how do I work with that to keep people safe so that they feel like they can come and go during that 18-hour, 24-hour day? So that's also important too, right? So it's just trying to think, very big picture, what protects the resident and gives them a sense of comfort.
No, I like that. I think that's really helpful just to understand like that comfort has some flexibility with how we're describing it, but ultimately they want to see that the community is well for them. Their home, their unit itself feels great. The acoustics, the layout, the flow of everything. That's going to allow people to want to stay longer in those communities. I want to go back to developing because I think it's interesting when people look at projects. Oftentimes they have an idea in mind. How do you approach figuring out the best and highest use for a piece of land or a piece of property?
Part of it starts with the market study that the developers, kind of work with, right? That gives them lots of information. Big developers can have the luxury of pulling, kind of a market study and doing that. Sometimes working with smaller developers, they don't have that luxury of going out and spending thousands of dollars on a market study. So, part of that is kind of again getting into that goals discussion with the developer. And if they have a site selected, we can look at it and say, hey, here's what's going on around your site. We look at everything from the major streets in the area, how many trips per day are on those streets, how far people work, what's the median income of the area. All that information is available on the internet if you know where to look, right? So we can look at all that. Part of that also, kind of the highest and best use comes from the city, right? And what the city will allow. And so that's again going back and talking to people at the municipalities and understanding what the jurisdiction, might be thinking. But then also just, there's a factor in what people will accept in terms of size and unit types. And, kind of understanding that, I've seen deals where people they build these big, massive units and they're targeting upper market and all that. And the median income of the area will not support that. So now all of a sudden you got to take a haircut on that rent rate and you're never going to make that back up. Right. So it's kind of being smart and realistic. And, sometimes I've had to tell a client, this is really not maybe the right approach to this. And I have to, as architect, right, my job is to work with the developer community. And if I see something that I have a question, it's my job to raise that question and ask then, hey, what's driving maybe the logic on what this need is? And, maybe we pivot and understand that and just trying to be a good partner as an extension of their business.
Yeah, I think that's helpful, right? It goes back to what you said, getting involved up front, being able to be a partner, being aligned with what the vision is. That's going to allow you to make the best decisions throughout. If you're being brought in after all the key decisions have been made, you're limited in how much more value you can add at that point. But if you can take a look, have a conversation about what are our goals, what are our objectives, what does the city want, that makes it easier to figure out the highest and best use for that land or for that asset. I know you guys do a lot of work and do a lot of consultations and with your clients. You've done a lot of business over the years. If they want to learn more, you can go to dot design. So dot design, not .com, but dot design. So check out dot design, and then we'll make sure we put a link to your bio or to your LinkedIn in our show notes as well. Right now, we're going to transition and go to our round of insights.
Okay.
All right, Kurt, give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
I would say, early on, the Wolf Point master plan. I worked on that, here in Chicago. It ended up being a 3-building development. I think just the fact that I didn't get the final project, I got the master plan, but not the final project. That taught me a lot about the profession and how to go about, kind of helping clients and setting myself up for success.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
Google Maps. I probably spend more time on Google Maps in a non-driving sense than most people, right? And I'm just constantly searching areas and trying to get an understanding of local flavor.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Oof, that's a good one. 'Cause I'm a website guy. I read a ton of websites. I probably recommend the ULI website to residential developers, especially small, new residential developers more than anyone. In terms of books, I don't know. That's a good question. Again, I'm a website guy. So I'm going to go website, ULI website.
All right. That's Urban Land Institute, right?
Yes.
All right. Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
I try to spend at least 15 minutes a day researching a topic. And if you're passionate about something or you find something that piques your interest, it's real easy to lose time doing that. But at the same time, that topic might lead you into something that you become passionate about, and that passion then, might be an opportunity for me in a design sense to kind of help somebody out.
Give me your number one insight for real estate design.
It goes down to listening. I see it obviously on my side as the architect or engineers, you obviously want them to listen. I try to spend as much time possible listening to general contractors and builders because they do it on a daily basis, and I can see what they're doing and have them explain it to me. It makes my efforts better on the front end for my next project. listening to the developer community tell me what's important to them, because again, I'm not a finance person. So for me to understand, their world and then kind of do that. So listening is just the most critical skill anyone can have.
All right, and you are in Chicago, one of the great food places in the country. Give me your
Yes.
favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Favorite place to grab a bite to eat. Oof, there's too many, but I would say lately, uh, gosh, we got it right down the street. It's still, to me, one of the better burgers in Chicago is Kuma's Corner. You want a chance of burger to just blow your mind, that's one of the places to go.
There it is. Great one. Definitely well known in Chicago. Kurt, you gave us a lot of great information. I loved hearing your story and just understanding the way you approach development. The Godfrey Hotel development deal obviously was one that certainly worth being proud of, very well known throughout the city. But you also talked about just how the everyday developer, the everyday investor can get better either through renovations or small developments by working with city officials, understanding what they're looking for, getting up front with the conversations with your architect and your planners, right? Having that work done up front is going to make it a lot easier to execute. But then also understanding, where there's opportunity, recognizing what's in the community, what should be in the community, why affordable housing isn't working right now, any better path, taking a look at that Maui approach, right? Mixed
Mm.
age, use, and income, taking a look at those four components and creating a better product for residents of today. Again, if folks want to learn more, they can check out the company website, hed.design, or they can go to your LinkedIn, which is in our show notes. Kurt, thanks again for being a great guest and coming on Multifamily Insights. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.